Welcome to Albion TV presents the AO Daily Show, your source of real news in an unreal world, keeping up to date on the latest news, events, and the great community of Albion Online. Today is Thursday, the 10th of November, 2022. I am your host, the Chosen One, and I am joined today by Tommy666 for a great new player show focused on builds that you can take into the mist and prepare yourself for what's ahead of you. We are also, of course, as always, joined by the great, the powerful Bogle in the back end, who is controlling the camera and knobs. How's everybody doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Chosen?
I'm doing pretty well. Bogle?
Myself too. I think we do have a good plan today for a show. Before we dive into the new player topic today, I want to mention real quick, if you guys ask questions, if you guys are active in chat, then there is a chance for you to win some gold during the show. The only requirement is to type messages in chat. No specific keyword or anything, just be about.
And do be aware that a lot of people have set their, or I guess Twitch really has set your incoming messages to be blocked from strangers. So go ahead and go into settings and change that so you can receive messages from me when you win gold. Because if you, block messages, I really can't send you anything. It's just not going to work. No free codes for you. All right.
What's
Bogle.
the topic?
Well, it sounds like Tommy has a plan to go in the mist, and he's thinking everybody should go in the mist, and that they should be prepared to build a character capable of surviving in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So with any new content, I feel like when people are trying to get into it, the first thing they think of is what build do they need to do this content? And often as a streamer, I got a lot of people in there that say, often they'll just say, flat, they'll say, what's the best build in this game? And I have to go through the purpose of explaining, like, there's good builds for everything. There's good builds for every different kind of content. And as the content changes from, say, PvE to PvP, whether it's solo to group content, whatever it might be, the builds often change based on that as well. So what I want to do is, rather than sit here and say, here's 5 builds that you can play in the mist, I want to try to explain the purpose of different item pieces so that people get a better understanding of why people would choose one build over the other, and maybe start to make their own builds based on that as well. So they can kind of figure out what works for one purpose, what doesn't work for one purpose, and kind of figure out how to put together a build so they don't have to rely on the cookie cutter ones. Especially in Albion, there's a lot of games out there where you'll find tons and tons of resources where you just follow a simple guide, but Albion isn't set up like that because things change every single patch, and there isn't really a huge amount of resources out there to find builds. So often when a new content is coming or a new patch hits, you're not going to be able to find like an up-to-date, like, these are the 10 builds that you could play. So I'd rather take the time to explain to people why you might pick one piece over the other, and then they can figure that out on their own.
I think that's a really good way to look at this. I always think of the builds in Albion kind of like, like an old school card game or something, like where you'd have to build a deck and have to have everything that you needed in order to deal with the specific situation that you're trying to accomplish. And Albion is very cool for that. You really can mix and match all of these skills to really tackle the content in front of you. And it's best to be aware of what you're going to be facing in that content and how to react accordingly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think about it the same way as well. Every piece of armor has a unique skill on it, and you can use that skill to your advantage. And trying to figure out why you would pick one over the other can be kind of daunting initially, because there's a whole bunch of items, and we're about to get a patch that gives us new armor as well, which will have even more skills available for you. And figuring out which ones to pick can be a little bit daunting. So I want to kind of give you a basic guide on how to get into that and help figure out the basics, at least, so you can have an understanding when you're going into the mist. Because I know as soon as I go into the mist, I'm going to run into some guy that has a very wacky build, and he's going to very quickly die because of it. And I'm just going to think, like, oh man, if you just spent a little bit of time figuring out why you didn't want to put that on, then things might have went different for you.
Yeah, there's certain things you want to be able to do when you go into a PvP situation. And before you go in there, you want to make a couple of choices. Is your goal to engage in the PvP that you're going to find? Is your goal to disengage from the PvP that you find? Are you going to go in there with an offensive mindset where you want to go in and blow somebody up? Or do you want to be able to outlive these fights that are going to be between multiple individuals, as the expectation is that you're not just going to run into 1v1s, but 1v1v1v1n.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually the very first thing I want to touch on is that before you start picking your build, I would say try to figure out what purpose you have in the mist. So decide what you want to accomplish in the mist. There are a lot of different activities you can do in the mist, just like how you can do a variety of things in the other open world zones. You may choose to go out for fame farm mobs, maybe even the new ones that drop shiny artifacts that allow you to craft the new items. You might go out to gather resource nodes. There are chests you can capture. There are groups of mobs in a camp you can kill as sort of like a mini quest sort of thing. There are something called turbulent mists, which you can collect and deliver to a destination for a reward. There are wisps you can free to get rewards. If you want to play more like me, you can go out to the mist with the main goal of killing anyone you find. But I would say really the thing is decide what you want to do before. You might want to mix a few of these things together. So you might want to say, oh, I'll gather, but if I see someone I can kill, I'll do that. Or I might want to kill some mobs, but if I see people, I'll run away. But taking the time to really figure out what you would want to do first is the important thing. And the reason I say that is because when I start breaking down the builds, I started out with basically two categories. So survive and kill. So if your whole goal is to survive out there, I have a list of items that you might want to choose from. And if you wanted to go out there to kill people, I would kind of pick different ones. And picking between those two and maybe mix matching so you have a little bit of survivability and a little bit of kill pressure is important. But I think figuring out what you want to do is the first thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think on the first day, for a little bit of advice for some of the people who are wanting to get in on the first day and maybe don't have a lot of experience with PvP already, choosing one of the builds that is more escape oriented so that you can go out there and explore and learn about what the mist has to offer and get an understanding of what kind of experiences you're going to be facing before you then transition into more of a PvP build, so that as they say in G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle there, Tommy. And it's good to have an understanding of what you're going to be facing before you make a final choice of how you want to face it.
Absolutely. Now on that topic as well, this might sound a little bit complicated right now, but it's totally necessary to mention it. This is not instance content like Hellgates or Corrupteds, where you're stuck using the gear that you bring in. You are able to swap between your gear sets while you're in there. So what that means is if your whole purpose is to go out there and PvE and you're PvEing along and someone comes and attacks you, if you're able to create enough distance between them, you can swap your gear to a set that's better for fighting them. It is recommended that if you're going out there, maybe you have one or two swaps. And I'll kind of explain things that you would want to swap. Things like your shoes, maybe your weapon, maybe even your cape could be great for just getting around. And then when you're ready to fight, you can swap to stuff that's better for the fighting purpose. Bringing a couple different things can make it a little bit easier for you to navigate the mist.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a great point there, to remind people that they can switch their gear in the mist, because that's one of the most important things. Just like in the corrupted dungeons, when you run into somebody and you immediately want to inspect them to see how you're going to be fighting against that individual, in these mist, it's going to be very important to inspect and understand what you can do to put yourself into a better position to win that fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a couple quick examples. I'm going to go through the gear a little bit more detailed later on, but very quick examples of things you might want to swap. The cape is probably the quickest one. Something like a Fort Sterling cape will stop you from getting CC'd. It has a CC debuff on it, and if you have that on and someone tries to dismount you or gank you, it could be enough for you to get away. Things like good set of shoes, so something like minor work boots or demon boots are very great for, very fast and very quick for getting away. So they might be a great set that you would have for riding around on your mount looking for something to do. But then I would quickly switch those to something like, say, soldier boots or hunter shoes if you want to attack someone. So having like a cape swap and a set of shoes swap, that might be something that makes a difference between surviving and killing someone.
Yes, absolutely. Being able to make those choices on the fly is absolutely incredibly important here. And like I said, I think that the two most important ones are the helm. Honestly, it gives you the greatest variety of choices that you can make, and the cape, like you said, because you completely choose how you're going. Are you going defensive? Are you going offensive with the cape? And then the helm allows you to see what your opponent is doing and make the correct adjustment to what they're doing offensively to counter it. Do you need to be able to cleanse, or do you need to be able to purge? Or do you need to be able to create distance?
Absolutely, yeah. And for the most part, I'm going to kind of focus on the 1v1 miss, because getting into the 2v2 miss gets very complicated. And if I'm being honest with you, I haven't quite figured out what the meta is going to be in the 2v2 miss. I don't quite have a good understanding of what it's going to shape out to be. I think a lot of us are waiting and seeing. Our first guess is that it would be something that's similar to 2v2 Hellgates. So you might have some double DPS and you might have some healer DPS, but I really don't have a great understanding of that yet. But I'm going to kind of touch on it a little bit. For the most part, I'm going to focus on the 1v1 miss.
Okay.
So
Because, yeah, I would say that the 2v2 is going to be very interesting. I think it's going to be very different than the Hellgates, honestly. Hellgates has a lot of burst-based combinations. I think it's going to go more towards the sustain builds because you're going to see fights with multiple groups at once. And spending all of your skills at once in order to get one of those burst plays is going to be very dangerous.
yeah, that's something I'm thinking about as well. You know, if you have a 2v2, that's four people in the fight, but if a second or a third group shows up, suddenly that's a fight of six people. So you have, upwards of four enemies in there already. So things that are good in group content might already be good in that situation because you're hitting upwards of four enemies. And when I say things in group content, I mean things like a Hellion jacket, for example, that heals you based on your enemies that are around you. So I'm really not too sure about the 2v2 miss. I think it's going to take a bit of time to shape. I'm a little bit more comfortable with theory crafting for the 1v1 miss because I think we have a little bit more precedent there
Absolutely,
between things
100%.
like corrupted dungeons and the way they work, and then in terms of solo open world gameplay and stuff like that. The 2v2 miss are, I think we're going to have to wait and see a little bit.
The one thing I will say again about the 2v2 is I expect we'll see lots of healer combinations in there again, just like it was dominating Hellgates for a while. Is I just think with separation being such an important thing and multiple groups fighting against each other, you cannot rely on those bursty DPS builds right away.
See, I
Maybe
think the
I'll be
opposite. I
wrong.
think the opposite, Chosen. I think it's going to be
Okay,
double DPS heavy.
all right,
Honestly, yeah.
and just 100% eliminate and pick your target, spend your
Yeah, so
skills.
I have the feeling that if you go in there with like a good double DPS comp that can execute quickly, you're not going to run into too many healers that know how to avoid those quickly. If you know, if you like, I've played quite a bit of 2v2 Hellgates. In terms of the comps that you fight, when you get to like the really good healers, they know how to deal with stuff. But how many of those really good healers are you going to find in the mist just randomly? Are they going to be able to deal with like having a cleric cowl, having a iframe, having a cleanse on timer, baiting out cooldown, stuff like that? I don't know. I have a feeling like double DPS might be just
Okay.
as strong.
All right.
But like
No
I said,
doubt. I can
I
see
don't
how
know
it could
yet.
work.
I don't know
Yeah.
yet.
Well, we will see. Let's go to the thing that we can discuss because, like you said, we have more examples of how it works in
Yeah.
practice. Let's go to those 1v1 situations, which is what I think most of the viewers are going to be experiencing because you don't need a whole lot of prep. You can just go out there yourself and explore.
Yeah, that's one of the amazing things about this is that as a new player or a veteran player, you don't have to take the time to find a group to play with. All the time, I'm reading about a lacking of solo content in Albion. All the time. In terms of finding groups, it can be tricky in Albion. So this is solo content where you can jump in by yourself and choose what you want to do and make your own ends out of it. So I think it's very accessible for players. So I think with that in mind, I think we're going to see a lot of people in there. So in terms of discussing, I mentioned it before. I'm going to try to separate builds and gear sets in two categories. So one for surviving and one for killing. So let's start talking about weapons. So there's quite a few weapons that are good for surviving. I would say ones that have good mobility are what you're looking for. So off the top of my head, things like a double-bladed staff, a bloodletter, maybe certain healers I think would work really well in that situation. These are the same sort of ones that weapons that you would see people using for transporting a lot of the time. So for example, if you're running through zones, trying to get gear from one end to the other, You would often pick these weapons so that you can get away from someone quickly. If they dismount you, you have mobility, so you can quickly get a few jumps out of there, and then ideally get your mount back up.
And these mobility ones, yeah, like you said, just getting away from the opponent to get your mount back up. And I think we've discussed in the past how important it is to keep your mount out and available to get on in the first place.
Yeah, but there is some situations like what I've seen in the Mist where you can't have your mount ready to go. So if we're talking about those little mob camps that they have, in order for you to have your mount out the whole time, you would have to remount up over and over again to kill all the different mobs in that camp. It would be very, very time inefficient to do it. But getting back to your mount is going to be the best thing for surviving. So if you can get enough distance away from your opponent that you can get your mount back up, that's usually how you're going to be able to survive. So what you have to do is you have to have a little bit of mobility in your set, maybe some cleanses, maybe some purges, maybe some defensives, and get far enough away that you can get your mount up. I'm going to discuss mounts a little bit later on, but what you would want to do is figure out how far of a distance you need between you and your opponent that you can click on your mount and get back on it without them being able to hit you. Because as soon as they hit you, it interrupts that mount. So what you want to do is get it far enough away that you can click on that mount, get on your mount before they can hit you again.
Now, do you recommend just mobility, or do you go with invisibility as well? Is that important to you in these situations?
Absolutely. So in terms of, there isn't any, I'm double checking my head right now, but there isn't any weapon that'll provide you with invisibility that'd be useful in this situation. There are some that have like a little bit of invisibility, but I couldn't see them being super useful. So I would say in terms of weapons, you're really just looking for mobility.
Mobility, yeah.
Yeah, so let's give some examples here. Bloodletter is actually my favorite one because it has 2 dashes that don't have a requirement on them. So if you look at the W, it has something that's called dash that jumps you every 17 seconds, and it jumps you 8 meters. 8 meters is pretty far. And then you also have the execute, the E ability, which is lunging stabs, and has a cooldown of 30 seconds. And when you do that, it jumps you forward an extra 11 meters. So if you're just using those 2 things alone, your W and your E, you've now created 19 meters between you and your opponent, ideally.
And that's a huge amount of space just in 2 moves.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one I would talk about would be the double bladed. It also has let's say 2.5 mobility skills. So the big one would be the sun run. I would start with the sun run on your W. And what it does is it gives you a movement speed boost by 30% for 4 seconds. For your E, it's a pretty big leap. It gives you a 15-meter range every 15 seconds. It also slows enemies, so there's definitely situations where you can use your E to slow an enemy, and then you can use your W and maybe your shoes to get away a little bit more. And then you also have the cartwheel, which does a little bit of extra movement, a small dash. But when you're chaining them together with your other abilities, it is kind of sizable as well.
The audience wants to see what an 8-meter radius is and how long that is on the screen. Do you want to use me as an example
I should be
here?
demonstrating all this. We're on my island right now with my test dummies, so I can kind of demonstrate this sort of stuff.
Okay.
And because you can use these abilities together, doing something like the W and then the E right after, it's already created you that much space. You also have the Q, which is the deadly swipe. It eats a lot of mana, but you can use it as a small mobility thing. And what you'll notice in a lot of PvP scenarios is that if you're just chaining your Q over and over again, it creates a small distance repeatedly. And if you do that over and over again, it creates enough space from your opponent or catching up with your opponent that it's actually pretty sizable, especially when you chain it together with things like your W and your E.
Yeah, like if I'm trying to get away from him here and I'm just running away here, it's very quick just with a single skill, you just catch up, let alone using your W and your E. You can just queue over.
So if you're on a weapon like, say, a dagger that has that mobility queue, and someone is on a weapon that doesn't have mobility queue, over a short period of time, you're either going to catch up to them or you're going to create distance.
Yeah, I'd have to absolutely be using skills to get away from you, and multiple skills too.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the kill ones now. There's a lot more options in terms of killing people than there is escaping people effectively.
Okay.
I say that as though there's every I would say every weapon tree has some way to survive, but it's really easy to break down what the best ones are. And we do have a lot of precedent for this because things like transporting have happened since Albion became a game. So figuring out what weapons are good for that, it has been pretty easy. The other one that I should mention in terms of survivability that's very common these days are swords. A lot of transporters are opting to just go with swords and take the Iron Will ability. And the Iron Will gives you some movement speed and increases your defensives a little bit as well. So a lot of transporters will just take that so they get the movement ability that's not purgeable, and then they can escape a little bit better with that. So something to mess around with once you have an idea of how purges and stuff like that work.
And the non-purgeable movement ability is huge and has proven time and time again as so many slows in the game and purges in the game trying to get you to slow down. Having something that escapes that is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. So using the Iron Will on swords can be an effective tool as well. I would say it's not as important in a 1v1v1 situation. I'm not going to be quite as worried about purges, especially if I have a few different dashes and stuff like that. I would say it's a little bit more useful when you're getting ganked by a group. I would say the survivability of an Iron Will is going to be a little more powerful if like a group is ganking you when you're going through the black zone or something like that.
Okay. So more impactful against a group than in solo play.
Yeah, I believe so. Now let's jump into the weapons that I think will be good for killing people. You are still going to want to have some mobility because you're going to want to be able to catch these people that are trying to escape you. But also you need enough kill ability that if someone's trying to fight you back, you can kill them before they can kill you. So there's a few that are really cool that I want to talk about. I have a feeling that there's 3 that you're going to see a lot of. And that's going to be the Bear Paws, the Battle Bracers, and the Bloodletter. I think you're going to see a lot of people in the mist. They're trying to kill people on these 3 weapons. So let's break them down a little bit. Bear Paws are an axe. Axes have a lot of W's that are useful. In most situations in the mist, I think the one that you're going to be wanting to go with is the Adrenaline Boost. And what that does is it gives you a movement speed buff by 40%, increase your attack speed by 40%, and your damage by 25%. The caveat to that is that you actually have to do damage within the first 3.5 seconds or the adrenaline boost drops. So in kill situations, it's great because you think you're probably going to hit your opponent at least within the 3.5 seconds that you hit your W. You've also got access to a few different Qs, but by far the best one axes right now is the Rending Rage, which is the 3rd one. And the interesting thing about it is if you use the 3rd ability on it, it has 3 charges on it. If you use the 3rd one, it adds a root there. So if you have a root, you have extra CC just on your Q alone.
Leaps towards the target and rooting them in enemies in a small radius for 1.5 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you also have the E, which is a pretty big jump. It's a 12-meter range, and when it hits people, it causes them to bleed, which does true damage over 6 seconds, as well as a pretty big chunk of damage. So I'll show you what a couple things would look like. If someone's mounted, what I would probably do is hit my W, I would hit my E, and when that E hits them, if you have big enough gear, or say you're able to land a poison in there, or something like that, it's pretty easy to dismount people. Mounts are capped in the mist. They're capped at a health of 1500, which means with Bear Paws, I feel like you could solo dismount a lot of people.
Okay. Ouch. Rough. Yeah, combining it with Battle Rush and such, you got a lot of mobility there out of the Bear Paws too, and it's all offensive.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Battle Bracers next.
Okay.
Gloves are the newest weapon line that we've had come out, and they have a lot of really interesting Qs and Ws that you can mix match here. I would say probably the most simple staple ones to go with would be the Dragon Leap, which again has a small mobility on its Q. For the W, the triple kick is a pretty great option because then you have mobility, you have catch. There's also a few other Ws that are good in fighting situations, but I would say I would probably start on triple kick as a default. And then the E is something called Falcon Smash, which basically gives you 2 different abilities. First one is you float into the air and become immune to all CC for 2 seconds, and then once you recast it, you dive towards a targeted position. So I'll show you what that might look like here once I put my stuff on and I get my cooldowns. If you're trying to catch someone, what I would probably do is I would just leap right at them with the E. So I just jump up, jump on them with the E. And then to close the distance, I would probably press some Qs. If you recast your Q after hitting someone, it actually does a small knock up. And then you also have the W, which is a small CC and gives you gap closure as well. So in terms of people trying to run away, it's a great way to hunt people down, and it does quite a bit of damage. And then you've also got that mobility for survivability too.
Well, that looks like it has a lot of options there for it out of the battle bracers.
Absolutely. Moving on quickly, I think the Bloodletter might be the most seen weapon in the Mist.
Well, yeah, I think it's the most seen weapon everywhere out in the open world.
Yeah, so we've already discussed earlier the survivability of a Bloodletter, but let's talk about how much it can kill people. So its E is something called lunging stabs, and when you dash towards someone, depending on their target health, it does more damage. So if they're above, like I'm just looking at the flat 4 one, but right now, if they're above 40% HP, it does 500 damage. If they're below 40%, it does 1100 damage.
That's a lot of damage.
It's a huge execute. And one thing that we have to talk about in the Mist that I feel like a lot of people have gone a little bit confused about in terms of build selection, in terms of fight allocation, all that sort of stuff, is that it's not a 1v1. It's a 1v1, v1, 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 v1. So if you're on that Bloodletter, for example, and you happen to come across 2 people fighting, 3 people fighting, you come across someone that's running away at low health, all it's really going to take is pressing that E through them to execute them. So say Shozen's running away from someone, he got ganked, he used all his defensive, he's running away, I slide my E through them and they're just dead. So it's
and
also...
with all the additional mobility too, it allows you to get into a fight, see what the situation is, get out of the fight right away, and come back later as well. Like you don't even have to stick around the fight.
Absolutely. So I think in terms of a lot of situations, it's going to be probably the top pick. I think that's the one you're going to see the most in the in the Mist, especially because of the fact that even just in a pure 1v1 situation, so if you're just dueling someone, the Bloodletter is still a great option. If you know how to use those skills properly and you have a good armor set up and you have good, all your other stuff set up, you can still kill someone in 1v1 situation pretty easily with the Bloodletter. So it's really hard for me to pick a situation where the Bloodletter isn't a good option. It lets you survive, it lets you kill, it lets you escape, it lets you catch. It really has all the tools that you might want to hear.
Tommy, as an avid Bloodletter player or somebody who is getting haunted by that weapon a little bit sometimes in the open world, I have to ask the obvious question. If you expect a lot of people to run it, how do I counter it? If I'm getting annoyed by that prediction and if it turns out to be true, what's the best weapon to defend myself against that?
Yeah, so this is another strength of the Bloodletter. The way that you defend against it is iframes. And explaining iframes to a newer player is a tricky thing. There's things like Royal Shoes, for example. They give you an invisibility frame. An iframe, for those that aren't aware, is basically a period of time where you can't be hit in a game. It's kind of a catch term for every video game that has them, but basically it means that you're not going to take damage during that time. There's other big defensives, things like a soldier helmet that we're going to touch on as well. A soldier helmet, the ability, when you're channeling it, makes you immune to damage for 1.75 seconds. So for example, if someone's sliding that Bloodletter through you and you can see it before they hit you, you have to hit that soldier helmet so that you don't take damage during that time. And that's a tricky thing to learn, because what you're going to want to learn is that where your health is means that you're executable, and the Bloodletter is going to be looking to do that. So you're going to be watching the Bloodletter and wait for their animation to start before you hit that skill, and that's a tricky thing. Now, I talk as someone that I play Bloodletter every single day. In my 20s team, I am the Bloodletter player, and I play against a lot of very good players, and even good players have a very tricky time avoiding getting executed. It is not a super easy thing to do, but like I said, there are defenses that work against it. Things like that soldier helmet, that cleric cowl, but you have to be really careful to watch when they're going to execute you. That's a counterplay.
All right, and then a triple reverse as a Bloodletter. I'm trying to bait these and then do it.
Yeah, I don't even
face first.
I don't even bother. I just go for it.
All right.
I just go for it. And if there's someone that's good enough that they can avoid that bloodletter E, then maybe I have an assassin hood and I just reset it, do it to them again. But I don't ever really overthink someone trying to. I never try to bait someone's defenses against it. I just go for it. And then once you're there, I mean, once you've closed that distance and you're on top of them, now you've got your Q, you've got your autos, you've got all the other tools to kill them as well. So not only is it an execute, but say they use their cleric cal. Now that I'm standing on top of them, they come out of their ice block. They're still low health because I wouldn't execute if they weren't low health. Maybe I toss some Qs in there. Maybe I have a mage cal. Maybe I have other things to do damage, and I'm on top of them now. What are they going to do at this point?
Green.
It's a tricky situation. I wish I had a better answer to give you, but it's
good
tricky.
enough. That's good enough.
I'm going to talk about pretty quickly about some of the other options in terms of killing people. I don't want to rant too far because I'm realizing now that we're still talking about weapons, so I want to get through a bit more stuff here.
Well, weapons are very important. They're
very important.
You know, everything else that you do is really going to be based off of what you're trying to achieve with your weapon.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the other options that you'll see in terms of most precedent would be things like corrupted dungeons, because it is a 1v1 situation and there's a lot of weapons that have been strong there for a long time. Swords have been the strongest weapon in corrupted dungeons since they've come out. They're great at killing people. They're great at keeping up with people. They're about to get nerfed, but I still think they'll be pretty strong. Death Givers, which is another dagger option. One Hand Holy has been a scourge among corrupted dungeon right now because it's so survivable and it still does quite a bit of damage. So I think you'll probably see quite a few healer players out there. You might see some Trinity Spear players. It's really easy to lead someone with a Trinity Spear. Light crossbow, it lacks mobility, but it can still blow up people pretty quick. Things like a one-hand curse. A one-hand spear is also a really good option. Sorry, my my alarm went off. A one-hand spear is also a really good option. It has a lot of mobility on it. It has ways to decrease mobility. It has pretty good damage. I would say it's similar to a bloodletter in the way it appears in the mist, but maybe not quite as strong. So I think there's quite a few weapons you'll see in terms of people looking to kill people. Not quite as many options in terms of surviving. And that's really all I had to mention in terms of weapons. I feel like that gives a bit of an overview of things to pick and choose through. Like I said, if you wanted to pick a weapon to kill someone, you could look at what works well in corrupted dungeons because it does set a pretty good precedent. But I would say try to pick something that's a little bit more mobile because in terms of surviving in the mist, whether you're trying to kill people or you're just trying to live, being able to escape fights when you're not winning is going to be really important. So those weapons that give you extra mobility are probably going to be your best friends there. Also, just to touch on weapons there again, in terms of swaps, if you went to choose one of them, like say a bloodletter or a double-bladed as a surviving option, you might not want that to kill mobs. So all you would bring is whatever weapon you like killing mobs with. So let's say that's a great axe, or let's say it's a one-hand dagger, and then just swap it to the bloodletter or the double-bladed when you're not fighting those mobs. Just go back and forth between those weapons when you think you need to survive and when you think you might just not have to worry about it.
Sorry, I'm just engaging in a discussion about the viability of one-handed curse, which is quite honestly the only real option for any real man going into the mist.
I'll be playing one-hand curse. I love the one-hand curse.
Yeah, it's the only real option. That's what you're supposed to bring.
Yeah, I will be playing one-hand curse. I have one in my inventory to show it off here as well. I think it's pretty good because, first of all, it does a ton of damage. You have a root W. You can reapply those curse stacks, and then all you have to do with your other equipment is just live. So you have to either catch people.
Have to live. Yep, catch them and live.
Yeah, you just have to live long enough for your curse stacks to kill people. So I think it's a pretty good option. The tricky thing is that you don't get any extra mobility other than the idea of rooting people. And so if you get in a situation where there's multiple people that you're fighting or you're trying to run away, with that one-hand curse, it can be kind of tricky. I would try to add in invisible options, things like an assassin jacket, things like an undead cape, really fast shoes if you have to, that sort of thing. But I'll definitely be playing some one-hand curse in there. That's one of my favorite like solo open world weapons.
It's one of my favorite as well. I think I've always made it quite well known that I've still stuck in my build from 2017 on one-handed curse.
Yeah, I still use it when I'm solo in the open world pretty often. I mean, it is something that the more skill you have with it, the better you're going to be. I've seen, there's a great streamer, Jerry, out there that plays in flat 4, and he'll take on groups of 10 people with his one-hand curse and, win half the time. So, I mean, the more skill you have with it, the better. One thing, though, if someone's arguing that it's your only option, consider the fact that when that E is going to pop. So if someone has one of those iframes that we talked about,
yeah, that's the one thing you got to worry about, those highly skilled players with their iframes. But again, if you're pulling off one-handed curse, you've also got to be very skilled at one-handed the iframes, because if you're not, you're gonna die really quickly as curse. It's all about using very low cooldown like dodges and stuff to get out of those high damage skills using iframes.
Absolutely. So let's say one-hand curse is a good option, but it's definitely like a high risk, high reward type thing.
It's just fun.
Oh, it's super fun. There's not a whole lot of things more satisfying in this game than watching someone get 4-stack curse and then watch that little skull pop above their head and lose half their HP. It's a very satisfying feeling, that's for sure.
Just watching them run at you thinking they're going to win, and then realizing that the tick counts are mounting, and that by the time they get to you, they're going to die. So they start running away from you when it's just too late, and you're just giggling.
Oh, my favorite in those situations is when you have the E on them already, and then you just press the assassin jacket, and they don't even know where you are. All they know is that they're about to die.
They're about to explode.
They don't know who's going to kill them. They just know they're about to die. Okay, let's jump into armors. So in terms of surviving, there's a few really good options. I would say there's a couple niche options as well. I would say my pick in terms of surviving is usually the assassin jacket. So on the assassin jacket, you get an ability called ambush. And what that does is it turns you invisible for 8 seconds. 8 seconds is a really long time, but you can only move within 14 meters of when you started it before it reveals you again. So you have to really choose in that time where you want to go. And why that's useful in escaping is that if someone has dismounted you and you want to get away from them, if they don't know where you are, it's a lot easier for you to get away. It's so easy to use mind games as well. When you pop that assassin jacket, people start guessing which direction you're going to want to go, and you can start seeing where they're going to head as well, and just go the opposite way.
Yeah, let them make the first choice. Let them go where they want to go, and you go the other way.
Yeah, when I pop an assassin jacket, all I literally do is for the first second, I stand completely still. I press my S key, I stand completely still. I wait to see where they start to move. And there's so many times where there's a group of 5, 10 people, and they all just move in the exact same direction. And then you just very calmly walk the other direction. Especially when they pair that with things like, say, the bloodletter or a shoe ability that gets you further away. Once you go invisible and you've created a little bit of distance, and then you press those abilities and you press your shoe ability, now you're far enough away to mount up easily.
One other thing about the ambush ability is also that it doesn't reveal you when you bleed, right?
Yeah, if you're bleeding, it doesn't, but if you do damage, it does. So in terms of surviving, certain abilities, if you're still having a dot on the other person, your ambush ability will reveal you. It is a little bit finicky. I've had times before where I do have dots on people, and then I press the ambush ability, and it doesn't reveal me. So it is one of the more finicky skills.
But if you're getting jumped, say, and you have a double blade, and then they put a dot on you, and then you press the ambush, and you don't have a dot on them, then you don't get knocked out of invisibility like you would with the invisibility potion or the Spectre. I think it's Spectre shoes, the leather shoes that make invisible.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah, if you press that and you're still taking damage, it doesn't matter. You still have that invisibility. And like I said, in terms of smaller groups, if it's a 1v1 or 1v1v1, whatever it might be, that invisibility is a huge tool that you have to get away from people. I would say in terms of survivability, the other option would be the cleric robe. I wouldn't say it's as good of an option. I would say I would pick assassin jacket 9 times out of 10. What the cleric robe does is it gives you a 3-second point in time where you're immune to damage. 3 seconds is pretty long. So if you know you have like a big ability that's about to hit you, pressing that and avoiding that damage is pretty big. The only tricky thing about the cleric robe is it has to be activated by damage first. So the first hit that hits you, you're not going to be immune to. So for example, if I'm in a situation, I'm going to keep talking about Bloodletter probably until I'm red in the face today. But say if you're in a situation where you're low on HP, say I'm down to 1 bar HP and that Bloodletter can execute me. If I prop my cleric robe, I don't get the shield yet. He has to hit me before that shield activates. So you'll see a lot of situations where someone will pop the cleric robe and then die anyways because the shield hasn't activated.
Yeah, that does happen. You've got to get hit once to activate the shield.
Yeah, a little bit more niche option as well, but could probably work depending on how you're playing, is a knight armor. A knight armor puts up a big wind wall that blocks people. If you use that knight armor to stop them when they have, big movement abilities on, and then you still have movement abilities on, it could be pretty good. But I would say your quick option is go with the assassin jacket. That's what I would pick in terms of surviving 9 times out of 10. Now for killing people, the assassin jacket is still a great option. That invisibility can be used offensively. So if you're trying to sneak up on someone, if you're trying to get closer to someone, if you're trying to avoid some of their abilities, it's still a great option in that situation. The other thing is that even if you're trying to kill people, you still want the survivability to get away if you're not winning. If you're not winning that fight or extra people showed up, you still want that survivability. So I would say assassin jacket is still probably pretty close to the top of the list there. Other options that you would see are probably the ones that you see the most in corrupted dungeons. So things like a mercenary jacket. What a mercenary jacket does is when you pop it, it gives you the ability Bloodlust, restores 80 HP whenever you apply direct damage to someone within the next 6 seconds, up to 9 times. And that's actually a huge heal. If you have a weapon that you can attack them a whole bunch of times, it's a very, very big heal. So if you're stuck in a situation where 1v1ing someone, and you get pretty low HP, you pop that merc jacket and you can still hit them during that time. You can almost restore all of your HP. The interesting thing is that the thing that counters it is a purge. Now, I don't want to get too complicated here, but if someone has a purge and you pop that merc jacket, you're kind of wasting your time. Other options that I think would be really good, a royal jacket in terms of killing someone sounds like it could work really well. What the royal jacket does is gives you the royal banner, which reduces your cooldowns by 50% for 7 seconds and gives you some attack speed as well. So if you're trying to catch someone or you're trying to do more abilities, popping that royal jacket when they don't have those extra cooldowns could definitely be enough to catch someone. And then things like the cleric robe that we mentioned or mage robe is a good option as well. They're both cloth, so which means they do a little bit more damage. They both have pretty good abilities. We talked about the shield. The mage robe also has one that purges people and gives a little bit more defensives. The cloth armors also have access to frost shield, which increases your damage resistances and also slows them and reflects a little bit of damage as well, which could be pretty interesting in fights. But like I said, in terms of armors for killing people or surviving, I'd probably pick assassin jacket most of the time.
Yeah, Assassin's Jacket seems like in a lot of instances, just for the survivability alone, that you're going to want that out there in the mist.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to mention this. I don't want to go too much into the mist armor because I know is going to be a dev talk that's coming up soon that's going to go into detail about all the different armors that are coming out with the mist. And I haven't messed around with them too much, but I do want to kind of theorize that the mist cloth item, basically what it does is it gives you 3 different ability options. It could be interesting in PvP situations. I think that could be used in the mist. I could definitely see situations in terms of fights where having the 3 different abilities could be really good in terms of surviving or escaping. There's also the mist plate, which drops a web in a radius on the ground, which purges all speed buffs. Seems great for killing people. If you dismount someone and they try to pop their shoes and you pop that spiderweb ability under them, purges all their shoes, it could be pretty huge. So I think those are ones that I would at least look into in terms of killing people. I know I'm going to mess around with the mist armor a little bit there as well for sure. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about them because we haven't really seen.
Yeah, we haven't really. It's very hard to judge them currently in the test server mist. They're very it's a very special case right now out there in the mist, right?
Yeah,
trying it.
But
I did want to hit on one thing because you said that there's going to be a dev talk soon. about the armors. It's actually going to be about the armors and about point 4, and that should be out next week because I do see some questions in chat about point 4 and how they can get it and all the information on that. That will be released with the next dev talk, which we do expect to be next week.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I'm going to be watching that for sure. I've messed around with them on the test server. There's a lot of abilities that are very cool, a lot that I don't even fully understand what they're for, but I know they have a purpose, so I'm just as interested as anyone else there.
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty good dev talk. I'm looking forward to it. I have a lot of questions about point 4 myself, and I am looking forward to getting some more answers on that. Do we want to go over any more of the special case build situations out there for the Mist?
In terms of the missed items, you mean?
Yeah, well, no, for you out there in the Mist, if you're going out there, because we just went over a couple of different builds and such, do you have any other things that you want to go over with that? Maybe what people should bring for potions and food?
Yeah, I've got that down here. I do want to quickly go through head and shoes if we could.
Okay. Oh, absolutely. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of headpieces, there's ones for surviving and killing still. I would say my favorite one is probably the soldier helmet. It gives you a 1.75 second channel, which means you don't take damage or immune to CC. You also get to move with that. The other option would be something like a cleric cowl. The cleric cowl gives you a longer time where you're immune to damage. It's 4.75 seconds, which is huge, but in that time you can't move. I would probably pick the soldier helmet over the cleric cowl in a lot of situations in the Mist, because being able to move and create more space is probably going to be more important. The other option in terms of survivability is the mercenary hood. The mercenary hood has a cleanse on it. It's probably the biggest source of cleanse that you find in Albion, at least until the next update. And right now, what that means is when you're popping that merc hood, if someone has you CC'd, you're suddenly out of that CC. So if you're getting attacked, I think we should
discuss that real quick, because when this comes out, you won't just have to use a merc helm.
Right, yeah, and I have that mentioned in terms of shoes there as well. There's also the new mercenary shoes, which have a cleanse and a dash. I don't know. I'm not sold on them yet, but at least in like open world content, I'm not sold on the mercenary shoes.
Okay. But yeah, you will be able to get cleanse on basically any leather helmet. So
yeah, you'll have access to more cleanses there. So those are going to be the big ones you're going to look for. Cleanses are great in terms of survivability, especially if it's just one person. Cleanses aren't as big if it's a group ganking you. So if it's 10 people, they're going to have a lot of CC that they can chain. But if it's just one person that has one source of CC, having a cleanse out there is an easy way to get away from it. Which is also why I mentioned that Fort Sterling. Is just avoiding one person's CC is probably going to be enough to live.
So you would go cleanse over purge then?
If I'm well, personally, I'm going to be out there trying to kill people at every
right, because that's the thing, is like that's where I go. See, when depends on what I'm doing there. It's like, am I trying to survive and just get away, or am I trying to isolate kills and get snipes? And if I'm out there trying to snipe a 3-way battle, I want to be able to purge.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think in terms of killing, you have a few big options. Fiend Cowl is probably very high up in that list. Fiend Cowl has a purge on any buff on an enemy within 9 meters with a 40-second cooldown. If I have that Fiend Cowl on and someone's trying to run away, I can purge their shoes, unless they have a sword, of course. Or if they're trying to use a mercenary jacket and survive, I can purge their mercenary jacket. If they have stacks on their weapon, I can purge that. So I think it's a huge tool for killing people. I think I'll probably be running the Fiend Cowl a lot of the time. The other two big options would be a Mage Cowl. Mage Cowl applies a poison damage. It's actually a lot of damage over 5 seconds. Basically what it does is it puts on your weapon. As soon as you auto attack that person, it applies the poison. That could be really significant in terms of dismounting people or just kill pressure in general. I think I would probably pick the Fiend Cowl most of the time when I'm trying to kill people, though.
Yeah, so the difference between cleanse and purge is cleanse removes status effects from you, negative status effects. So if somebody does something to you, you will cleanse it off yourself. A purge removes defensives and positive effects from your enemy. So you remove it from them. You purge it from them. So if they have like
Yep.
offensive stacks that they use to generate offensive skills, you purge that from them. If they've used a cleric robe and they're going to, absorb damage or hit you back at a higher rate, you purge that from them. It allows you to better secure kills.
Yep. Now to mention briefly the mist things that I think would be interesting in the mist, you've got the mist leather hood that actually gives you an immortal buff for 4 seconds, and during that time you can't drop below 1 HP. So, example, if someone's trying to kill you, popping that immortal buff could give you 4 seconds of survivability. You can still move, you can still do anything else that you do during that time, as opposed to like the cleric howl and the soldier helmet that don't let you do stuff during that time. So it could be pretty big. The only thing is that it's only going to save you from dying. You're going to be at 1 HP at the end of that. So you have to either kill someone in that time or get far enough away that they can't hit you, even with an auto attack. The other interesting thing in terms of killing people, there's the mist plate helmet, which gives you a web that attaches to an enemy and it slows them. And if they're dismounted, you can dash to them right after. I think that's going to be pretty strong for catching people. If someone's trying to get away and use the mist plate helmet, it'll be pretty good to catch people. But again, I don't want to spend too much time jumping on that stuff because we haven't messed around with it yet.
Okay. Sounds good. And we are getting close to the end of our show here, so we got a couple more things we need to go over here, I believe. Boots.
Yeah, we're on to shoes. I'll speed up a little bit here. Couple of good options in terms of survivability. I would say the one that's used the most these days is actually a gathering item. It's the Minor Work Boot. The Minor Work Boot has an ability on it called Flee. When you press it, it increases your move speed by 120%, and it also increases your crowd control resistance by 200% for 10 seconds. That is insane. It has a really long cooldown, which is the drawback. It also silences you and makes you not able to attack the other person. But if you're just trying to get away, who cares? Minor Work Boot is really hard to deal with as a ganker. It is really tough to deal with as a ganker. So if you're just looking for like one option in terms of survivability, if you do every other thing wrong, if you have those Minor Work Boots, a lot of times you can live just because of that alone. Other options that are similar, Demon Boots has a similar ability, but the Demon Boots are based on your health. So it's really strong once you get to low health, but if you're high health, it's not that useful. There's also Soldier Boots, which has a run ability called Wanderlust that ramps up over time. It ends up getting really fast towards the end, but you start out kind of slow. But I think that's a pretty good option in terms of either running away or catching people. So if you're trying to kind of min-max a little bit and do a bit of both, I think Soldier Boots might be a pretty good option. Other kill options that you have, the ones that you see the most in corrupted dungeons are actually just any plate boot with rejuvenating sprint. So what that does, it gives you an 80% run speed for 5 seconds and also heals you during that time as well. So you'll see most people in corrupted dungeons running rejuvenating sprint right now, and I think you'll see that quite a bit in the mist as well. I don't know if you're going to see more soldier boots or rejuvenating sprint right now, but the good thing is that if you bring in soldier boots, you have access to both of those. So you can kind of pick between both of those depending on what you want to play. Same thing goes with if you bring in the demon boots, you have access to either rejuvenating sprint or the demon boot ability, the vengeful sprint. So you can kind of pick between which of those you want to use for each situation. In terms of shoes, just to touch on a little bit, the mist leather shoes are pretty interesting. They basically allow you to dash to a position and then recast to return to where you first cast. So the interesting thing about yeah, I think there's a lot of weapon synergy there in terms of, you dash towards someone, you do big damage, and then you dash back and they can't hit you again. I'm thinking things like Dagger Pair that does a big burst of damage. You've got that charged up, you dash to them, you E them, and then you dash right back before they can hit you again. I think it's pretty interesting. I'm not too sure how I would like them in like a 1v1v1v1 situation because it doesn't give you big mobility in terms of getting away from people. But I think if you're just out there just to kill people and you're willing to take that risk, it could be a fun option. We've got Offhands. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. Mistcaller is a pretty good option for pretty much everything. Mistcaller gives you extra cooldowns. Cooldowns are great because if you want to use your ability more cooldowns let you do that. So that's good for both killing people and escaping. Tap roots are pretty cool as well. Tap roots give you a big burst of health. They have a huge health bonus to them. So if you're trying to kill people, you're trying to survive, a tap root is a pretty good option. There's a couple of specific ones that I would pick just for killing people. Things like a Muzak gives you a pretty big bonus to damage, both physical and magic damage. Then you've also got the Crypt Candle, which gives you a really big bonus to damage, but at the expense of defensives. So if you're just out there for killing people, something like a Muzak or a Crypt Candle is a pretty good option. But I think most of the time, something more like a Mistcall or a Taproot makes sense.
Okay. That's understandable in these situations. What about some cheap alternatives? Do you have anything that's a cheap alternative to some of these offhands that are a little more expensive?
I mean, I would just pick the Mistcaller. Mistcaller is a cheap option in most situations. I don't think you can really get cheaper than that. Having more cooldowns is always good. If you're trying to get away, if you're trying
more cooldowns, always helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never had a situation where having more cooldowns wasn't a good thing. So I would say the Mistcaller is probably the cheap option that I would pick most of the time. There's also like a basic shield that you might bring in terms of giving you a little bit more resistance, a little bit more defensives, but I would probably still pick the Mistcaller most of the time.
And now that we've gone through offhands, I guess we're down to consumables.
Yep, that's where we're at. So in terms of food and pots and stuff like that, one thing that I want to kind of explain that I think is really important is that in most PvP situations, when you're allowed to, people will bring multiple foods and multiple pots. And the reason for that is that switching your food in your pot is a really easy way to change how you're playing. So for example, if you're just out there to try to get away, you might want something like, say, a pork omelet, which gives you more cooldowns, or you might want something like a beef sandwich, which gives you more HP. But even still, I would have something like a cabbage soup, because what the cabbage soup does is it gives you increased health regeneration by 270%. So what I might do is I might have a pork omelet on, and when my health gets low, I swap it over to a cabbage soup so I can regain health quicker.
Pro tip right there. Carry snacks, just do.
That's a pro tip. And in terms of PvE, PvP situations, having those food swaps is a pretty easy way to give yourself an advantage. Same would go for potions. I always bring multiple potions for every situation I do. Something like a res pot, which gives you a big boost in damage reduction, increase your defenses by 47% and your CC reduction by 90%. I feel like people don't realize when they first start playing the game, they think the major resistance potion is just a defense thing. But more so than that, it gives you CC reduction. So if someone's trying to lock you down, stun you, not let you get away, that CC reduction could be the thing that lets you live. But I would still have things like invisibility potions, so you could escape, health potions, so you can heal. And having a few different options in your inventory is an easy way just to change how you're playing and give you more options to live.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely agree. You want to always have a couple of different options for potions and, food. Definitely bring that extra soup so you can regain your health out of combat. But I always like to bring both invisibility and health depending on which situation I'm in, whether I'm going in for the kill or if I, want to keep the invisibility on me in case I get jumped at any given time.
Yeah, I had a few more things that I wanted to get through, but as we've it's gone a little bit longer than I thought. I'm gonna jump ahead, and I want to give just a few quick build examples that you would use, just so that if you don't want to take the time to figure out the stuff that I was talking about or listening to me try to ramble as quickly as I possibly could towards the end there, just if you want to kind of jump through. Let's give an example for surviving. Let's go with the Bloodletter. Let's go with the Mistcaller. Let's go with that assassin jacket there. Let's go with the miner work boots. In terms of a helmet, let's go with the soldier helmet. This is a cheap build. This build costs very, very little. You can only use this. I would only effectively use this for escaping. I wouldn't really use this for trying to kill people. But with that said, you still have access to that Bloodletter E. So even if you have this on and you happen to run across someone that's really low health, you can slide through that person and kill them even with this defensive set. I would probably toss a Fort Sterling cape on there so you're avoiding 1 CC. And if you're even going out there to do multiple things, having this extra set in your inventory is an easy way to survive. So I would say this is probably going to be my favorite build in terms of surviving, escaping, that sort of thing. You can mix and match depending on what you prefer. If you want to use the Cleric Cowl, if you want to have a cleanse option, if you want to have, a double bladed instead. But I would say this is probably going to be your basic escaping, surviving type set.
Good advice for an escape set here.
Yeah, and like I said, in terms of your build, you can always change it once you're in there. So if you bring this set as well as one to fight people, or you bring this set as well as one to, kill mobs or gather, whatever it might be, I think in terms of a total price, a flat 4 set like this, you're looking at, let's see, 25K? 25K is not a lot. So bringing that one extra set in your inventory really isn't going to hinder you too much, and it might make you live. And if you have a million in your inventory at the time, having that extra 25K set just for riding around might be what you need. Let's talk about a kill build now.
Okay.
I'm gonna say I'll probably be using the bear paws a lot. I think I'll probably go with bear paws, something like a fiend cowl, so I can purge them. I'd probably still want that assassin jacket. In terms of boots, I think soldier boots are going to be pretty nice. I don't think you're going to have the really long reset, kite sort of mechanics that you see in corrupted dungeons. I think having that soldier boot ability when they're already low health could be the thing that lets you catch up with them and just do enough damage to kill them before they remount. So I think that'd probably be something that I'd be looking for. A lot of these parts are interchangeable though. So if you swapped it to, say, a bloodletter with a crypt candle, you have an execute option. If you swap it to battle bracers, you have still a lot of kill damage, for sure. You still have a lot of escapes. You also can catch people off guard. I think gloves are interesting because they give you a lot of play variability depending on what abilities you use and how you use them and stuff like that. So battle bracers could also be another good option in there as well.
Battle bracers have you can really mix it up. You don't have to. You're not pigeonholed into one way to win. Is the way I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other things, mounts. Now, one thing, because your mount is being reduced in health to a max of 1500, it doesn't stop the armor and magic resistance you get from the mount. So something like, say, an armored horse gives you a pretty good defensive bonus in terms of getting CC, dismounted, that sort of stuff. My mount of choice in pretty much every open world PvP situation is the Grey Wolf. I'm going to explain something that isn't mentioned here, but it's very, very important about the Grey Wolf. It lets you mount up faster. It has half the mount up time of your other mounts. So if you're in a situation where you can create a little bit of distance in front of your opponent and you can press that mount ability, it's going to take half the time that your other mount would. And I could not count how many times I've been chased by someone, chased by a group, and I was able to get that mount and mount up within like 0.1 second of them about to hit me. But if I was on a different mount, if I was on an armored horse or something, and I had to wait that whole 5 seconds, that wouldn't have happened. I died literally 2 days ago in a situation where I thought I had a Grey Wolf and I didn't realize I had a stag on me for some reason. I think I swapped it or something. And I went to mount up in front of them, and they hit me on the last second that I was mounting up. But I know if I was on a Grey Wolf, I would have lived. And that was a big death, too. I think that was like how much kill fame did I drop? I think I dropped like 500k kill fame. It was a big one.
That's never good. That's always rough.
Never good. But if I had a Grey Wolf, I would have survived.
You hit with the stag GG in chat here. Oh no.
Yep.
Rough situation. Gotta keep an eye on those mounts. But you're right. That is a completely different. It's like a game changer when you can mount up a full second early. So it's awesome.
It's 2.5 seconds. It's huge. 2.5 seconds is a huge amount of time in terms of your mount advantage. And I think if a new player is watching this, the only downside to a Grey Wolf is they are expensive. They're about 400k.
Yeah, they're expensive there.
But in terms of splurging on something, if you're bringing out a set that's worth $1 million, bringing out a mount that's worth 400k isn't crazy. If you're bringing out a set that's worth 600k, a 400k mount is also going to be something that lets you live in that situation. I would say it's going to be worth it a lot of times. It's a little bit expensive, but if you have the resources to do it, I think that's probably going to be your best option.
100%.
Oh, I think that's about it. I think we we covered all the
Yeah, I think you've covered quite a bit today. Yeah, it was like a marathon here, just going from one thing to the next, and it was a lot of information given. We hope that you guys out there have a better understanding of some of the gear that you can use when you head into the mist and just start experiencing that 1v1v1v1v1 content. And maybe we'll have Tommy back in a couple of weeks, and we'll do some of the 2v2 combinations that you can do, because I know
I was
you're
hoping to touch some of that today too. We just didn't get that far. I ranted too much. I thought I would have a little bit more time today.
An hour flies by sometimes. It really does. But we discussed a lot of content, and I think it was good for the audience. And this just means that we have to bring it back for a 2v2 mist show.
Absolutely. And by the way, guys, AOTV always puts up their VODs. So if you thought it was a little bit hard to follow along with what I was saying, because I think I would have found it as well, you can always go back and watch the VOD and, you know, take the time to kind of click through the VOD to see where I touch on each subject. So if you're like trying to learn about the hoods or the shoes or whatever, you can kind of click through it time by time there.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, Tommy, thank you for coming on. I look forward to having you back on. In fact, I think we're going to have you back on later tonight.
Yeah, you
with
sure are.
the NA War Report at 0 UTC. You'll be joined by Robin Hood RS, the Great Tazik, and I believe Nazori will be there as well, at least in the background.
Absolutely.
We're going to try to get him set up and ready to start hosting that as soon as possible. But yeah, I'm looking forward to tonight. And yeah, thank you again, Tommy, once again for another great
Thanks
new
for
player
having
show.
me.
Oh, anytime, man. Anytime. All right. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys later tonight.